Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring Economic Development with MEDC. I'm Meredith Harris. I will be your host, and we have my co-host, Jill Morin, as well. Here for episode 15, we have a special guest, Kevin Kuros from Mass Office of Business Development, which we're really excited about. Last time we saw you was the first day of September. It was also the first day of school, and we had Superintendent Mike Bergeron with us, which was such a fun episode.
It was really great.
I think it actually is one of our top episodes that people just loved it.
Yeah.
And I think that's because of the picture we had of Mike.
Definitely. we photoshopped his back to school picture with some lasers, some double exposure.
Yeah. We won't do that to our guests today, but I'm really glad that people
I was getting nervous for a second, but what's going to show up here? So.
We won't do that today to poor Kevin. But I think that's why we had a lot of people tune in last week, because they knew that photo was going to be
I think
available.
So. Might have been. Also, he gave a lot of really great information about the ties between Marlboro Public Schools and economic development and all of the awesome opportunities.
Yes.
It was great.
So we're going to top it today, though. So, Jill, I think you have a few administrative things to go over, and then we'll jump right in.
I do. All right. So if you're joining us for the first time, please let us know in the comments. We're streaming both to Facebook and to YouTube. So let us know that you're watching. One of our favorite guests
is already commenting.
Already here
Spencer.
For it. Spencer Geary. Love him. He's one of the awesome video content creators, editors, all the things at WMCT TV, where we will also be sharing this broadcast. So if you're joining us on the replay, we're going to have our phone number, our email address down there. Let us know what questions you have. Let us know what topics were interesting to you. If you have any ideas for future episodes, shoot us a little email. Just let us know. We're excited. And during this
Try again.
During this broadcast, let us know if you have any questions, concerns, or if you want us to clarify anything. If there's a specific website we mention and you're like, wait, what was that again? Let us know. This is an interactive live stream, and we're so happy to be with you this morning.
Absolutely.
Beautiful morning.
With that, I'm going to introduce our special guest today. We have Kevin Kuros from the Mass Office of Business Development. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Meredith. Good to see you again.
You
and
too.
Jill, nice to meet you.
Yeah. Oh, nice to meet you too. Oh, hold on a second. I got your names reversed. Ready?
Uh-oh.
Look at how smooth this is. All right.
Wow, on the fly. Perfect. Well, Kevin, thank you for joining us. I'm so glad to have you today. We've had a number of different folks that have been on the podcast, some from Marlboro specifically. We're really trying to maybe bring in some folks at state level, to talk about how we work together, really just talking all things economic development.
Sure.
But you are a huge piece of what we do at MEDC. You guys do what we do at the state level. So can you tell people a little bit about what is, we're going to call it MOBD, Mass Office of Business Development?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on. We are always looking to kind of raise awareness and raise the visibility of the office. First of all, the office is not about us, the regional directors who staff the office, but I think it's important for business owners and operatives, really, across the Commonwealth to understand who we are, what we do, and how we might be able to help them grow their business. So that's really our role. So the Mass Office of Business Development is actually part of the Baker-Polito administration. So other organizations that you may have on, maybe might be quasis that where their leadership team might be appointed by the governor, but it's an independent organization, that type of thing.
Yep.
We are actually part of the administration.
And you guys are underneath the Executive Office of Economic Development and Housing, correct?
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So we ultimately report to Secretary Mike Keneally, who is the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development. And the way the Secretariat is organized is there's essentially a housing vertical within the Secretariat, and then the economic development vertical. So obviously,
which is our favorite.
Yeah, we're in the economic, but they go hand in hand.
Of course.
And I always like to joke that I feel we have the most important Secretariat in the administration because it deals with where you live and where you work. You know, so we think
doesn't get more granular than that.
Yeah,
right?
No, exactly. But so the way the Mass Office of Business Development is organized is on paper, we're organized regionally. So I'm a regional director, and I've got responsibility ostensibly for Central Mass. And there's 6 of us who cover the entire state. So not a lot of manpower to cover 351 communities. I believe there are 75 communities in my region.
Just 75.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me show the picture
Just
up here.
75.
So you've got this whole central area.
Exactly.
Here,
I've got the
pink.
red section.
The red
right,
section.
that you're showing in the picture.
Who has the
there.
blue section?
Deb Boronsky,
Oh my
actually.
gosh.
And I think she's got 110 communities.
Wow.
Now, obviously, every community takes advantage of our programs at different levels,
ways.
And some don't participate at all, and
Yeah.
that's certainly their option.
Right.
But what's important to understand though too is in the last year or two. First of all, I've been with MOBD for just over 2 years. I joined in May of 2019. And
So before everything got a little crazy, right?
yeah, exactly. I joined, economic development before we hit a pandemic. So, and it was very, very regionally structured, and those are pretty hard lines. And the lines aren't drawn because we're on commission. I mean, that's not what we're about.
Right.
It's really drawn for efficiency,
Sure.
so that none of us are traversing the state to try to meet with businesses, that type of thing.
Right.
So there's a lot of overlap, and depending on workload, if one of us is working on 5 or 6 projects at the same time, and a new really big project comes up, even if it's in our territory, it might get assigned
To somebody else.
To somebody else. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're just trying to be as
efficient.
responsive as possible. Yeah.
So Kevin, let me ask you a question. So I think people might not even know that you guys exist, right? So how do you typically come in contact with a company? Is it through organizations like ours or through other, municipal officials that are calling you guys to say, hey, we've got this company that you guys should talk to? Or do you guys seek out the companies, or is it a combination of both? Or?
All the above, actually.
Okay.
What's really interesting is, and we'll talk a little bit more about the types of projects that we
Yep.
help with, I'm sure, in this conversation. But we just recently did, probably 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, a forensic analysis of where are we getting our leads from.
Sure.
And we work, for example, very closely with mass development.
Yep.
The state's financing.
We had
wing.
Kelly on the podcast actually a couple
Exactly,
weeks
and
ago.
Kelly's
Yeah.
fantastic, and
Yeah.
I work very closely with Kelly. Probably talk to her 3-4 times a week,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah. And so our manager, our senior director, Peter Milano, has been with MOBD for quite some
Great
time,
guy.
over 20 years, I believe. He asked each of us what we thought was our top source of referrals.
Sure.
And I think every single one of us said mass development, because we do work with them so often, right?
That's awesome.
But when you crunch the numbers, it's actually municipalities.
Is it?
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah,
all
there
right.
you go. And
We'll take it.
and that came as a little bit of a surprise. But
Yeah.
then I started looking through the list of projects I've been involved with, and since I've been at MOBD, and probably 2/3 have come from a municipal lead.
Yeah. Well, I was saying to Linda in our office yesterday, because she asked me the question actually of, how would Kevin get, how do people know that they exist, or how would somebody find him or be able to talk to him? I said, a lot of it is, again, that partnership between your local and your state officials being able to talk to each other. And, we know that you guys exist, so it's our job to almost be an ambassador for the programs,
Right.
to be able to get out there and help. Because certainly, as you stated, 75 communities? I mean, you need us all to be on the same team and being out there and promoting the resources that are available to
One
people.
thing we did actually during the pandemic, because typically we're also the place where inbound requests from businesses that are considering relocating to Massachusetts, either
Correct.
expanding in Mass or relocating here.
Right.
It's usually our office that they find.
They go there
And-
first.
And so a lot of that activity kind of slowed down during the pandemic.
Sure.
So we took advantage of that like kind of lull in the activity to proactively reach out to all 351 communities.
Wow.
And so each of us, called or emailed or followed up with, literally every single community in our regions. And again, we did, some cross-region support as well to handle, for example, Deb with 115 communities in
She
Western
might need a
Mass.
little bit of help.
Need a little bit of help,
Helped her out a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But again, it was just to raise awareness and let people know, what we do, who we are, and
Right.
and that
How
type
you
of
can
thing.
help people.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
And then honestly, another really good source for us are chambers of commerce.
Yep.
We try to stay connected, with the chambers, and then you may or may not be familiar with what we call the REDO program, which
Yep.
is our Regional Economic Development Organization program.
495 partnership.
Exactly,
Yep.
495 part. And I understand they were just on your show recently.
And shout out to Marlborough Regional Chamber Chamber of Commerce as well. Rob over and his team, great partners.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and so we get a lot of referrals, from there as well. What's interesting is the Redo program, which is one of the programs funded through our budget. One of the metrics they have to report on their annual reports, or maybe it's semi-annual, is number of introductions they've made for MOBD.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So they're making sure everybody's working for their money, right?
Exactly. Right. Again,
awesome.
Just get the word out there. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about how you guys are organized, how you're structured. Now, there are a number of different programs and resources that are available for companies and for businesses that are trying to come in, entrepreneurs, people that are getting started. Can you tell us, we certainly can't go over every program, right? So we'll give a link to people to be able to go to the website to check everything out. But what would you say are maybe the top utilized programs? And then the second to that, so I'll give you a little time to think about it, what are the most underutilized programs that you think more people should know about, or that we could get more information out there for?
So, I believe our primary reason to exist originally was in support of the Economic Development Incentive Program. EDIP is the common acronym, and that program alone has a couple different components to it.
Sure.
You all here in Marlborough have taken significant advantage of the TIF program, which tax increment financing program, which is really a subset of EDIP. Mm-hmm. So the Economic Development Incentive Program is really a mechanism through which businesses can seek tax credits, both at the local level, but also at the state level in certain circumstances.
Right.
And so, I guess if you were to say job description for an MOBD director is to understand
the TIF program,
the EDIP, the Economic Development Incentive Program, and really help shepherd both businesses and municipalities through the program, because there's very finite steps that you need to follow.
Well, it's a big deal. It's a contract, and
yeah, exactly. You've got municipal agreements. You've got to tee up a whole bunch of information about the scope of the project and how many jobs are going to be created and what's the capital investment going to be and what's the time frame and
then making sure that they follow through on everybody holds up their end of the bargain.
Right. And there's compliance reporting after the fact. We've got a back office team that kind of handles the compliance reporting piece. We're more like front facing and the marketing side of the program.
So I want to talk. Can we dive a little bit into TIFs? So we've talked about TIFs a lot on this podcast because TIFs are a common thing that's in Marlborough. We have several active TIFs. It's been a tool that the city has, adopted, and they use it often. Yeah. But sometimes there's this misconception of what a TIF is. Right. Sure. And I always use, there's a graphic, we should have pulled it up, we didn't, but there's a graphic that MOBD puts out that kind of shows how it's on the increased value.
Yeah.
So your perspective, how does that work, and how does it, benefit a municipality at the same time that it's benefiting a company?
Because our residents often ask questions about it.
Right.
And we've tried to explain in many different ways, but definitely hearing from your perspective on what are TIFs and what do they do for a city?
Because we're all taxpayers in the community that we live in. Yes. So oftentimes we'll look at a tax break for a business, and your first reaction at the time is kind of visceral. You're like, well, why are they getting a break? And I just got my tax bill in the mail yesterday, kind of thing. But you really need to look big picture to kind of get a better sense for it. And the easiest way to explain it is, and I'll use a really basic example, but if you had just a green field, with no building on it or whatever, the property tax that a municipality is going to collect on that is very insignificant.
Right.
The value of that parcel is really just the underlying value of the land, a couple $100,000, whatever it might be, right? And the tax revenue generated from that is going to be minuscule.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you have a business comes in, and they invest $50 million, and they put a fantastic office building up, or manufacturing facility, or whatever it might be, a lab, or whatever it might be, research facility, anything like that. All of a sudden, the value of that parcel went from a couple $100,000 that's being taxed to $20 million, whatever the number is, right?
Right.
And so with that capital investment that business made, the assessed value of that parcel went up dramatically, and the tax liability also goes up dramatically.
Right.
So what a TIF allows a municipality to do is to offer some relief from that additional tax liability.
So you're continuing to collect that baseline the whole time.
Right. So that you continue to collect the baseline. So you're not taking money off the table.
Right.
You are essentially agreeing to collect less additional revenue
Over a certain period of
for a
time.
finite period of time.
Right.
Okay, and so I think one of the beauties of the program is it is, first of all, it's negotiated entirely between the business and the municipality. So we don't get involved in the negotiation side
the number
of things.
of years or
Right,
the
right,
percentages.
Yeah.
But I think what's really nice about the program is the flexibility, because you can have a TIF that runs anywhere from 5 years to 20 years.
Yep.
And the municipality can offer relief from anywhere from 5% up to 100% of that additional liability. Over the span. So, I mean, a most common model might be a 10-year TIF
Yep.
with 100% relief in year 1, 90, 80, 70, 60. I mean, that's
It
what we,
goes down.
that's what we see, like a declining value of the TIF
Sure.
over the years. And if you think about it from a business's perspective, they just made an enormous capital investment in most cases. So we do see most TIFs are front-loaded, where businesses will tend to get more relief on the front end of a TIF than on the back end. That would tend to decline over time. But the net of it is, that the municipality is still ultimately collecting significantly more tax revenue than before that business made that investment in the community.
On top of the jobs that are added, that trickle down effect of people using your barber shops and your restaurants.
Exactly, stopping
all
at the
that
restaurant,
stuff.
filling up their car on the way to or from
Right.
work,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
All that ancillary business, right? We talk about this a lot because I don't think it's a difficult concept if you don't, if you don't look at it on paper or you're not really understanding it. Because to your point, I think sometimes people get a little nervous and
Yeah, no, absolutely, sure.
But
They
so
might
do you-
hear it as a tax break. but
Right,
What
they
about
don't-
my tax?
yeah,
Right.
exactly, and,
Sure.
and it's a normal reaction to have.
So we've been using it for years in Marlboro. Are you seeing it become a more popular program throughout the Commonwealth?
Yeah, and I think honestly, part of that is education, like things like this, where we're trying to maybe explain conceptually what's happening
Right.
here, and raising awareness that it's not a tax break for corporations, so
Right.
to speak, that at the expense of
Taxpayers.
personal taxpayers, individual
Right.
So
taxpayers.
we've got a
gonna
great
say we have a
comment,
comment, right?
from President Austin.
Hey.
We've got a few from him, and I just want to make sure we don't miss them. Thank you so much for joining us. We love when you join the conversation. So President Austin says the TIF has been used very effectively in Marlboro to enhance economic development and stabilize, this is huge right here, stabilize the tax base with the new revenue generated.
Yeah, but, and President Austin says all the time, you gotta continue to pay for things, right?
Yeah.
Right, right.
So you have to think long term on how do you continue to pay for services, and the city has a budget at the end of the day, and you got to be able to pay for it.
Right.
So new
To have a predictable
correct
tax rate. Yep.
So having new growth, that's what it's all about.
Yep.
Now I gave a very simplistic example. We started with a greenfield and put a building on it.
Yeah.
But it also, comes into play for expansions. For example, the most recent one for BJ's.
BJ's.
They moved into an existing building.
Right.
So a business moving into a building, unless there are significant improvements, there's not even likely going to be a tax liability
Right.
increase over what the prior tenant had. If they're the same kind of use, there's not going to be much
Right.
value add, so to speak,
Right.
as far as the investment. But in a case like BJ's, they're building
The parking
a
garage.
parking garage that was going to significantly increase
Right.
the value of the parcel.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought that up because I think that's important too. We were trying to explain too when we were going through BJ's was that they weren't getting the quote unquote tax break on their entire project either. It was a savings on that additional value, which was only on the parking garage because that's
Right.
where that additional revenue was coming into the city. So it's a great point. And then the
Yeah.
other thing about BJ's too, that they weren't new to Massachusetts, they didn't get that investment tax credit either, correct? So that's the other piece of it too. Typically, a lot of companies are seeking this program not for the municipal incentive. I mean, that's a great thing for them to have, but it's on the heads that come into the Commonwealth, correct?
Yeah. Well, first of all, for manufacturers, they can get a 3% investment tax credit.
Right.
As part of the
Just
overall.
because they're in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Right.
Platform. What's really interesting too, and I think we need to touch on this about the economic development incentive program because we've just focused just on the TIF piece
TIFs,
of it.
right.
Yeah. But the second piece of that, so in a TIF, there are essentially two partners in that. There is the business that's making a capital investment, which is increasing the value, and there's the municipality. Okay, and it's just a two-way partnership and relationship. Even though it ultimately has to be approved by our board, it's just between you and the business, right?
Right.
But where a third partner can come into play is if the business also decides to pursue state credits.
Right.
Okay. And
those are the ITCs, right?
Yeah, right.
Yes.
And so if they pursue state credits through the Economic Development Incentive Program, they can get relief from their corporate tax liability, up to 50% of their corporate tax liability. And again, so it really only comes into play for, first of all, a profitable business. So if it's a business that's on, awarding state credits that you can't take advantage of
what's the point?
Is feel good. That's
right,
it. I mean,
right.
That doesn't really impact things. But what's important to understand, though, is while I think statutorily a business could apply for state credits without getting a TIF,
Okay.
our board has made it very clear that they will most likely not approve state credits
Unless
without
you have the
municipal involvement.
Okay.
They want it to be a three-way partnership.
Yeah.
So to expand on that two-way partnership that you've got on the TIF, and then we come to the table.
Right.
As well with EDIP.
So everybody's got some skin in the game.
Exactly.
Yep. That
And,
makes
and
sense.
what's really kind of interesting about the dynamic in that is you guys at the municipal level care mostly about the capital investment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you care about the jobs because
Sure.
of the secondary,
Absolutely.
value, but you're focused on the capital investment. We're focused on the job creation piece.
Right.
So our credits might be $5,000 per job created, or $10,000, or $15,000, whatever the number might be.
Depends on each.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Do we have a question?
We've got another great comment by President Austin that the TIFs and these other, not initiatives, incentives.
Incentives. Yep.
Bring in jobs that helps for our Marlboro community
Absolutely.
grow and increase the assessed value of the building.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we added that in. Spencer's got a question, which I don't know if we've moved on from it or not, but maybe we can. How do you decide how long a TIF is for, and maybe also who decides that?
So that's the municipality. That's
Right.
all negotiated between the municipality and the company. It really depends on the different factors, right? So you have companies like when GE came to Marlboro, they're signing a 20-year lease. They're bringing with them 500 jobs, taking 200,000 square feet.
Yeah.
That's a very different project than, some of the smaller companies that are coming in, taking maybe 50,000 square feet with 100 jobs. So it really just depends on the company, the amount of the investment that they're making, the number of jobs, the scope of the project.
Yeah.
And that's all negotiated between the municipality and the company that's looking for the incentive.
Perfect.
Marlboro,
from the company's perspective, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
No.
from the company's perspective, if I were working for a company, I would always lead with 20 years at 100%.
Right. Of course they would.
It's their job is to try to maximize
advocate.
their
Of course.
benefit, and you're going to want to strike some middle ground that is both
Right.
fair
Right.
and equitable.
Benefits both.
Exactly. Right.
Well, and what we try to do too, Spencer, is we look at, so the other piece that's negotiated is kind of the percentages over each year.
Yeah.
And typically in Marlboro, we try to stay around a 65% average exemption over the length of the TIF. But as Kevin talked about earlier, it's all negotiated, it's flexible, depending on the situation that's in front of you.
And for another, I think, great example of that is it may also depend on the facility that they're moving into. For example, if you had a vacant facility that's
Right.
really, blighted,
Right.
whatever, and a business all of a sudden is going to move in there, you might be more generous
Right.
for something like that.
Because you can
than,
see the long-term benefit.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think probably one of the best examples of where the TIF was used was the Atlantic Management Project. So that's where GE, Quest Diagnostics, that years ago, that was a vacant site. It was the old, I think it was the old HP, an RCA building was in there as well. And so Joe Zink and his team at Atlantic Management came in and really transformed that site, and were able to use some of those tools to make sure that was a really, bustling project. And now it's one of our, most active sites in the city, even through the pandemic. You had
Really?
Quest
Yeah.
Diagnostics, and it's no longer GE, but Cytiva. Those folks never stopped during what was, one of the craziest times in history. But
Right.
do we have another comment? Another question?
Not right now.
No. All right. I'm sorry. I
Oh,
thought
no.
we did. You're tricking me, Jill. You're tricking me. So we've talked about one of the most utilized
sure.
programs. Give us one of the most underutilized programs that you think people should know about.
Well, let's talk about the Vacant Storefront program.
Yeah,
a little
let's
bit.
do that.
So it's underutilized because
new.
it's new.
Right.
Yeah. And I believe statewide right now there are probably maybe 15 communities that have even gone through the process of setting up a vacant storefront district, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
Who was one of the first, Kevin?
You guys were right
Was
up
it
there.
Marlboro?
Yeah.
Do you guys see her fish for that?
And you know what? And I think I might have prompted that, though.
I think you did.
I think I was hounding you. So you guys got to do this.
Right.
So for those who are watching the podcast, the Vacant Storefront program is a new program. It's only been around for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's targeted for your small businesses that are going to take advantage of a vacant storefront that might exist in a downtown area.
Does it have to be downtowns, or can
It doesn't necessarily have to be downtown. The beauty of it, I think, when the program was first dreamt up, it was going to be the downtown vacant storefront program, right?
Yeah.
And they took out the downtown piece because, like, some smaller municipalities may not even have a true downtown. They might have clusters of businesses on this side of town, clusters on this side of town, and vacant storefronts in both of those areas.
Yeah, so you didn't want to limit them.
Right. So the vacant storefront district that a municipality has to file does not have to be contiguous.
Okay.
So it could be a pocket here and a pocket there.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and so that's what's nice about it, because many municipalities might have like little cluster areas and maybe not a formal downtown, that kind of thing. So the process, though, is the municipality identifies parcels that have been vacant for more than a year.
Yeah.
And provides us with an inventory. They come to one of our board's quarterly meetings and they present a couple important things. One is the district that they're proposing.
Sure.
Second is why they think this program will benefit the district. And third is a source of funding. This happens to be a matching grant program.
Yep.
Oh.
And so our board is going to want to see a dedicated source of funding for the program, so that we know that if a business does apply to move into one of these vacant storefronts, there's going to be a match
to
there.
back it up.
Yeah. So as far as funding is concerned, it's pretty interesting because as new as the program is, and with only maybe 15 communities statewide even having a district on file with us, we've seen a bunch of different sources of funding.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So,
People
for example,
getting creative.
Yeah. So the town of Webster, for example, which has taken advantage of the program more than any other municipality in the Commonwealth, small town of Webster, the downtown area, they're using it to revitalize their downtown. They've put 4 businesses into vacant storefronts already in that small downtown stretch in Webster. And they had a town meeting appropriation for $100 and something thousand into an economic development account. So that's the money that they're using to fund their match. Westboro, for example, they have a billboard fund. So they sell billboards in the town, and that revenue goes into an economic development account. So
interesting. I didn't know
so
that.
their match gets funded by billboards. I think yours gets funded as part of your
Toolbox. Yep. So plug for the Toolbox.
Yep,
So we've had it since 2015. We rolled out our own smaller incentives. So what we found was that the TIF program, which is the one that we use most often, that was capturing those bigger companies that were coming in, making a large investment, taking big space, lots of job numbers. And we had kind of like this middle ground of companies that were a little bit on the smaller side, but not considered a small business. They were like a medium-sized business that needed, again, maybe 25,000 square feet. They were bringing 50 jobs, but they didn't necessarily qualify for the TIF program. So we set up, we call it our Economic Development Toolbox. It's a set of incentives that are run through MEDC, funded through the city of Marlboro. But we have a downtown rental assistance program. We call it the Small Business Incentive Program, which is just like the TIF program. And then a storefront beautification, which, obviously new awnings, signage, different things like that for existing business. But that's how we were able to get into the program, because we have that money available. And as much as people use the toolbox, sometimes we find we have the same problem as you, that we just need to get out there more, because we drive through the community and we see plenty of spaces that could benefit from using the funding. So how do we make sure that we're really utilizing the funding to the best, to our best ability? And when we saw the vacant storefront program, it was like, hey, that goes hand in hand. You're able to get your local
especially
business
targeting
owner.
the smaller businesses too.
Yeah. So we have a success story from it, because we got the district up and running, and then Patricia Murray from Dancing Dancing Orchid Soapworks has been the first recipient for Marlboro through the program. So Kevin, explain a little bit about what does she receive as a recipient of the Vacant Storefront program.
Right. Actually, yeah, before we go there, just one other source of funding that other
other communities are using?
use community development block grant money, which
Oh,
is
okay.
federal money.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of our only guidelines, and we're super flexible as far as where the money comes from. But one of our guidelines is you can't use state grant money to match a
offset.
state grant.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're getting some other state money into a fund, you can't use that to match.
That.
Right.
That makes sense.
Right. So the way the program works though is once a business identifies that they'd like to take advantage of a vacant storefront, they notify the municipality. And then they have to submit an application to us, kind of defining what their business is, and then we will match up to $10,000 of a municipal grant.
Sure.
Okay, so for example, if and I don't recall how much the Dancing Orchid match was.
I believe it was 10.
It was 10,000.
Yeah,
okay,
yep,
sure.
Yep.
Right. So the municipality identifies that we're supportive of this business.
Absolutely.
And we're going to offer them a $10,000 small business grant, whatever it might be. They then get a $10,000 credit from the Commonwealth on their taxes. But the beauty of this program is it's what's called a refundable tax credit. And for those folks who might not be familiar with the difference, if in a traditional environment, if you had a tax credit of $10,000 and you only owed the state $5,000, okay, the $5,000 of that credit that you couldn't take advantage of just goes away. Okay. In a refundable tax credit, which is what the Vacant Storefront tax credit program is, if you don't have $10,000 worth of tax liability because you're a small business just starting up, whatever, you actually get a check back from the Commonwealth.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, for the
that's
balance.
really cool.
So it's
you're
kind
not
of
losing
neat.
anything.
Yeah, exactly. So it's perfect for the small business who might be squeaking by as they first open that first storefront kind of thing. First time they're dealing with rent, they're going from a home-based business
to
it's
all new.
Exactly.
Patricia was the perfect applicant for this. So she, we got to give her a plug for her because I think she's like weeks away from being open, right in our downtown area. She was originally over on Hosmer Street, and she was in a building, great little building, but no visibility, no, people weren't walking into her storefront. Second floor. Yeah. Not great in terms of retail, people being able to come in and see her products, and she's got wonderful products, all soap, handmade soaps, candles, lotions, you name it. We're all big fans in our office. We love her stuff.
We love when she visits.
We do love when she visits. But she was great. I mean, so she was able to move her business from Hosmer Street to downtown Marlboro. Andrea Beebe's space at I think it's 266 Main Street had been vacant for several years. Not because there wasn't activity, people interested in the space, but I think Andrea is one of those landlords that she really bought into this idea of, revitalizing the downtown with the right type of retailer and making sure that we had something downtown that was going to really add to the revitalization of the downtown area. And we found the perfect.
Which we totally appreciate.
Yeah, another key note too about the program. It's got to be first floor.
Yep.
Okay, so the identified spaces, because we want to create foot traffic is part of what we're trying to accomplish here. Also, it's got to be retail.
Right.
Okay, so the CPA's office or the dentist office or
that
whatever.
Doesn't qualify.
Exactly. We really want to see businesses like Dancing Orchid or restaurants or those types of things. They're going to create foot traffic. Kind of create a vibe. And just create a buzz to get people excited about the downtown area. So.
Yeah.
So we're bumping up against time, but before we do that, Kevin, a couple of questions for you before we wrap up. What's the application process like, and what's the approval process like? And you've mentioned a couple of times your board, things like that. What does that look like? Is it is people going to go, I can't deal with this, or is it easy, or how do you guys make it easy?
It's relatively painless, but so essentially the board, which is called the EACC or Economic Assistance Coordinating Council, our independent board. So while we can help you through the process of making sure the paperwork is in order and this kind of passes the sniff test and it looks like it's something that the board will likely approve.
Right.
It is an independent board that could say no to any particular application. I mean, they're very deferential to our advice as to
they take your recommendation,
which projects are good, but they are an entirely independent board. Yeah. So they meet quarterly. All right, and actually the next meeting is next week.
Okay.
Typically the meetings had been in person, but for the past year and a half they've been virtual. We are meeting virtually next week.
That's probably allowed a lot more people to participate too.
It has actually,
Yeah.
and I think there's some talk as to whether it makes sense to kind of try to move to that model permanently.
Going forward, yeah.
It was easy to do when there was an executive order that said all meetings can happen remotely. It's a little bit more difficult to navigate.
Sure.
As it is now. So. The board meets quarterly, and essentially it's your typical board meeting where
Yep.
there's an agenda and a facilitator. But what will happen in the case of TIFs, which typically don't require a lot of discussion or debate, they're often voted as a block.
Yeah.
Okay. And unless, for example, the mayor would like to speak on behalf of a TIF, we typically don't even need the business to
Attend.
to speak. I mean,
Yeah.
we'd love to have them attend.
Sure.
To listen in and be available if there are any questions. Right. But it's not a
But it's pretty
requirement.
straightforward.
It is pretty straightforward.
Right.
And our sense is, as long as the paperwork is in order and the municipality feels this is beneficial to the municipality and the business feels it's beneficial to them, let's
We're
roll
good.
with it. Right.
They're not looking to be a roadblock.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But in both the instances where a business might be going through the Vacant Storefront program or seeking state credits in addition to their TIF,
Yep.
in both of those instances, the business owners will get to speak and address the board.
Sure.
Here's my and it's super cool. And what's really interesting is a lot of times with small business owners, they may be a little bit nervous, and the board has been super accommodating. Is like, hey, you're doing great. Keep
You're doing
going.
great.
Yeah,
Keep going.
Yeah, we've had people kind of freeze up a little bit because they don't do.
Well,
this
they're
type of
not
thing,
used
yeah.
to doing that kind
Yeah.
of
It's
stuff.
nerve-wracking.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
they run a restaurant. They don't do public speaking,
Right.
that kind of thing, in front of
Right.
a board that controls money over their head,
Right.
that kind of thing. So,
Right.
so the board's very sensitive to that, and really the board comes from all walks of life. We've got academicians on there, we've got economists on there, we've got appointees from the secretariat.
Cool.
Those,
A lot of different
yes,
people.
exactly. So a lot of different perspectives,
Yeah.
and the questions will often reflect that too. And so the board. In the case of someone who's getting a TIF and credits, we'll hear from the municipality. We'll hear. Usually, the regional director will introduce the project, and we'll just talk about it at a very high level. We'll allow the municipality to talk about it, and then we let the business owner talk about it.
Yeah.
And then once they give a very brief 2 to 3 minute overview of here's what we're trying to accomplish here, then it's open for the board to ask questions. And the board will usually ask a few questions. Oftentimes on the Vacant Storefront, even though it's not a requirement, we almost always will have at least one board member say, what is the landlord's skin in the game here? Are they participating in this?
Yeah.
In addition to the municipality and the state,
Yeah.
are you getting a break on rent, or have
Yep.
they agreed to absorb some renovation costs? Those types of things.
Right.
It's not a requirement, but it's also
you'd
nice
like
to
to see
know.
that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're nice to know that.
And we had that with Andrea as well. She was, great in terms of giving Patricia, a couple of months here and there to be able to make her upgrade. She, was able to put some skin in the game as well. So that was awesome.
I think
really
one
a
of the-
true partnership of
Yeah,
everybody
one of the
coming
landlords
together.
in Webster, I believe, let the business take occupancy a couple months ahead of time without charging them rent, so
Yeah.
they could start doing the renovations.
Exactly.
That type of thing, while they still had their prior location open.
Right.
Kind of thing. So,
Well, and
yeah.
I mean, you look at that, and it's such a great, example of everybody coming together to really make it happen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
awesome.
Right.
It's
So then after all the businesses that are on the agenda present, at the end of the meeting, they'll call for a vote. And they'll vote on approving the TIFs, usually in a block. Sometimes they might have to do a conditional approval, like we're still waiting on in smaller towns town meeting approval.
Sure.
So even though the agreements are in place, on a handshake agreement and a written agreement,
Yeah.
but it's not validated.
Official.
It's not official until the town votes on it. So oftentimes, it might be contingent upon
Something.
successful town meeting approval of this, or those types of things. So,
Yeah.
so
we don't have that problem in Marlboro because
You don't.
we have a city council. We
Yeah.
meet every other week, and
Yeah, and that's the beauty of being in a city.
Correct.
Because first of all, two things happen with municipalities. Sometimes smaller municipalities, sometimes town meeting might not be for several months,
Yeah.
and we recognize that business moves faster than the speed of government in many
Right.
cases, right?
Right.
So that's why
That's true.
we try to be sensitive to that, and vote conditional approvals. This is ready to go. All we need is that
which
town
is great
meeting
because
vote.
I don't think that was always the case
Right.
either.
You know,
Which
I
is
mean,
awesome.
we prefer not to have to do
Of
conditional
course.
approvals. You know,
Of
make
course.
sure all the ducks are lined up. I mean, that is our strong preference, but we recognize that sometimes, you know, we want this to be teed up because they want to break ground as soon as town meeting approves this.
Right.
That kind of thing. You know.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you know that's a piece of it. You know.
Yeah.
And there was one other point, and it just escaped me actually. So
That's all right.
yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you, I mean, the obvious question, right? I mean, we're coming out of COVID. I don't even know if we're coming out of COVID.
Yep.
We might be going back into COVID. I'm not really sure. But what does the next year look like for MOBD? Or what's coming down the pike? Are there things that people should be, you know, keep an eye for? Or, you know, how you guys
what?
doing?
I think the best way to answer that is to tell you what the last year and a half has been like.
What
for
it
me.
looks like, sure.
So when I first started, we were super busy with, you know, TIFs, the EDIP, the new Vacant Storefront program, whatever. And then we went from that, like, super busy, like not enough hours in a day, to answering questions about what phase of the reopening am I in? Am I an essential business or am I not?
Right.
You know, we were part of the team that actually, there was a portal at one point where you could post questions as a business. There were over 8,000 businesses posted questions about, like, how does this impact my business specifically?
Right.
We were part of the team that was responding to those.
That must have been a trip.
Yeoman's effort to try
Wow.
to get through all that. All the folks who had primary responsibility, we were kind of overflowing. We were handling, you know, a lot of that. So we went from almost no new economic development because everyone was
I know,
unsure.
no one knew what was going
Do I want
on.
to spend a dime on my business
Right.
right now when I don't even know if I'm going to have a business 6 months from now, right?
Right.
And then for the past probably 6 months, we have been super
Back
busy again,
Yeah.
which is really encouraging. It started with, we get a lot of requests like code name projects where,
Yep.
where a business might hire a consultant and they don't even want to reveal what their name is, but
Yep.
we're exploring Massachusetts, Texas, Maryland, and Oklahoma or something like
Right.
that as potential locations for our facility. And they're going to want to do a profile of, we think here are the 2 or 3 communities in Massachusetts that fit us best. In fact, we might have even found facilities that work.
Right.
But we need to understand full picture of what do the incentives
What does the
look
state?
like.
What can the state
Yeah,
do?
what can the state do? So from workforce training fund, you know, how are we going to educate our people to help with recruiting through mass hire, through help with financing through mass development, or credits through the mass life sciences or whatever. So part of what we do is respond to these RFPs. For, you know, both code name and non-coded projects, to say here's what the
What we can
package
offer.
Wow.
will look like. You know, and there's a municipal piece. Oftentimes we'll reach out to municipalities and say, listen, what do you think you could do for a business like this? We're not asking you to commit to a TIF,
Sure.
but does this fit the kind of the profile of the business that
you're
you
looking
would
for.
Typically offer a TIF to?
Right.
You know, and so we can't include terms of a TIF because it's obviously not even been negotiated. But
But
at
you
least
can tell them what can be, what's the
Exactly.
possibility.
Yeah, or you can show history and that type of thing.
We found it really encouraging, Kevin. Same thing, you know, the last couple of months, 6, 7, 8 months, that the life science industry in particular too. I mean,
Just booming, yeah.
Oh my gosh! And they're looking for space, and they need it yesterday,
Yeah.
and it needs to be done. And
the numbers they
crazy.
throw around too, like we're going to invest $300 million
Right.
and hire 500 people in the next 36 months.
Right.
It's just mind-boggling numbers in many
That's
cases.
all good news though, right?
So,
Yeah.
so if I were to say, you know, what's the future hold? I think it's going to be more of the same. You know, we
Yeah.
have been so tremendously busy. And our typical
It's a
MO.
good thing.
Yeah, no, it really is. And our typical MO is Peter Milano, who manages our group. He will assign a lead and a backup on any of these major projects. So it's the lead's responsibility to kind of pull together the whole response packet.
Yeah.
But then, you know, the backup will also be chasing down information from
Sure.
municipalities or
Make
different
sure that you
programs.
guys are
Right.
performing at the
You know,
top.
and everything
Great.
goes through probably 3 or 4 sets of eyes before it leaves. We're super meticulous on
That's
even
awesome.
like paragraph formatting and that kind of stuff. You know,
You-
we're a bunch of anal retentive people,
Which
who,
is okay.
Yeah,
I know. I think the
yeah.
last TIF agreement too, we went back and forth a couple of times on like specific language, and I'm like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's good though. It's good to have more eyes on it. than-
Exactly, and another thing is like the TIF agreements have to be reviewed by our council because
Right, 'cause
a lot
you
of
guys are
times
signing it
we
too?
use the old one. Well, you
Yeah.
know what? Maybe the statute number reference changed, and you're now referring to a piece of Mass General law that no longer exists.
That doesn't exist.
Right.
Right.
So we're also trying to get more involved in that part of the process as well, just to make
Yeah.
sure everything stands up legally. Because the last thing you want is a legal challenge, and
Right.
and then there's a hole in an agreement
mess.
somewhere. Yeah. Right.
Right.
So.
And there's so many hoops that business owners need to go through anyway. They've
Right.
got a
So why
million,
not make
right?
it easier for
Right.
them?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd kind of like to leave with anybody who's watching this is, you know, while we exist to support the economic development incentive program, The secretary really wants us to be way more than just like the tax incentive guys and gals.
Yeah.
You know, he wants us to essentially be like the outside marketing team.
Yeah, the boots on the ground.
The boots on the ground. And also kind of like an ombudsman to help businesses. So like literally every single business I meet with, I talk to about the Workforce Training Fund program.
Sure, that's another big one.
Yeah, you know, and hopefully you can get them on at some point.
It'd be awesome.
On your show to talk about it because you know it's a fund that everyone pays into. Few businesses take advantage of it. So your unemployment insurance payment that you make every 2 weeks when you make payroll, a very small portion of that gets segregated into a separate account at the state level. Law of large numbers, a very small portion of all those payments statewide, you end up with around $21 million a year sits in this training account that can be used for matching grants for workforce development.
Wow.
You're paying into it whether you know it or not as a business. You know?
Wow.
It's a great program, and we do have a lot of companies in Marlboro that have taken advantage of it, but we should include a link at the bottom of this for folks to be in the know about it if you're not already in the know about it.
Yeah, exactly. And we view ourselves as we call ourselves Team Massachussetts. So it's Mass Development, it's Mass Life Sciences, it's Mass Econ, who we haven't really spoken about, but Mass Econ is a nonprofit that helps businesses with site identification, site selection.
Yep.
So someone might say, hey, listen, we're looking for a 50,000 square foot building with 4 loading docks, access to 3-phase power, water and sewer, whatever the requirements might be.
Yeah.
And Mass Econ will help them with that search and provide some potential sites. So we work with them. I'm also on the phone with them a couple times a week as well on the various projects.
Great organization.
Yeah, and it's a service that they offer free of charge. And the beauty of it is they're not steered by. They're not brokers, so I'm going to steer you to my property because I know I'm going to get a commission on it. That kind of
it's
thing.
a little different.
Yeah. And so they're part of Team Mass as well. And what every one of us in Team Mass says, if you call one of us, you get all of us.
Yeah, guys. If it's not you, they need to talk to. You'll know exactly who.
Yeah,
they should
exactly.
Talk to.
So we're doing handoffs all the time,
and
which is great. So it's just a really cool. This is the best job on earth for me.
That's awesome.
I mean, I have a political background. I was in the legislature for a while, so I'm a little bit of a policy wonk.
Yeah.
But I was a municipal official before that, so I see that piece. But my private sector was in business development, sales, and marketing for management.
You found your niche.
Yeah, so I have this cool job that allows me to combine like policy wonk and local official and business development person and all that. So I look forward to going to work every day and so.
That's awesome.
So on that note, I don't think we could end on a better note than I love going to work every day. That was awesome. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
This is fine. Happy to do it.
Really, really excited to have you and excited to get more information out to people about the programs that are available. It's, again, resources that are available for people. Check the website, go to Mass Office Business Development and call us if you have any questions. I think we've also put Kevin's contact information. Here's my contact information. We can certainly get you guys in touch with Kevin and his team over at MOBD, but again, a great resource, many different resources for people to take advantage of. So with that, I want to wish everybody a wonderful Wednesday. We will be back not in 2 weeks. We're coming back beginning of October. I don't know the date on the top of my head, but first week of October, we will have Counselor Christian Dumais, who's also a lifelong resident of Marlboro. He will be joining us as our next guest, and we're really looking forward to that. So we will see you all then.